the day you stop explaining yourself. There comes a day, quiet, almost unnoticeable at first, when something inside you just stops, not breaks. It doesn't shut down, just stops trying so hard. Stops rehearsing explanations in your head. Stop justifying your choices to people who have already made up their minds. Stops over-explaining things that were never misunderstood, just not accepted. And it's strange at first, because for so long, explaining yourself felt like survival. It felt like if you could just find the right words, the right tone, the right timing, maybe they would finally understand. Maybe they would finally see you. Maybe they would finally say, "Okay, I get it now." But that moment rarely comes. Not because you didn't explain it well enough, but because some people are not listening to understand. They're listening to respond, or worse, to stay right. And somewhere along the way, you start to realize something uncomfortable. You were never actually being heard. You were being evaluated, measured against expectations you didn't choose, compared to versions of you that no longer exist, questioned for decisions that only you have to live with. So you try again. You explain more clearly this time, more calmly, more carefully. You soften your words. You remove the emotion. You make it easier for them to accept. And still, it doesn't land. That's when it starts to shift. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a quiet thought that slips in one day. What if I don't need to explain this anymore? And that thought feels wrong at first. Almost selfish. Because you've been taught that being understood is part of being good. That explaining yourself means you're considerate. That if people question you, it's your job to make it make sense for them. But what if it isn't? What if your life, your choices, your growth don't require permission? What if understanding is not something you can force? That's the part no one really tells you. You can be completely clear, completely honest, completely open, and still be misunderstood. Not because you failed, but because they're not in the same place you are. And maybe they never will be. That realization is heavy, because it means letting go of something you didn't even know you were holding on to. The hope that one day everyone will get it. The hope that one day you'll be fully seen without question. The hope that clarity will finally bring peace. But peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from no longer needing to be. And that's where things start to change. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who keep crossing them. You stop defending decisions that already feel right to you. You stop turning your life into a presentation, hoping for approval. And instead, you just live it. Quietly, honestly, without the constant need to translate yourself. It doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you stop communicating. It just means you become more intentional. You start noticing the difference between someone asking to understand and someone asking to challenge. You start feeling when a conversation is safe and when it's just another loop you've already been through. And slowly, you begin to choose silence where you used to choose explanation. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Because not every question deserves an answer. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Sometimes, letting people think what they want is the most peaceful choice you can make. And yes, it feels uncomfortable at first. There's a part of you that still wants to jump in and say, "That's not what I meant. That's not who I am. You're seeing this wrong." But you pause, and you realize something simple and freeing. The people who truly care to understand you don't need constant explanations. And the people who don't won't be convinced by them anyway. That's the shift that changes everything. You stop performing clarity for others and start living in it for yourself. You stop trying to control how you're perceived and start focusing on how you actually feel. And in that space, something unexpected happens. In that space, you feel lighter. Not because everything is perfect, not because everyone agrees with you, But because you're no longer carrying the weight of proving yourself, that weight is heavy. And most of us don't even realize we've been carrying it for years. Every time we over-explain, every time we replay conversations, every time we try to fix how someone sees us, we're carrying it, trying to earn something that should have never required effort, understanding, respect, acceptance. And the day you stop explaining yourself is the day you stop negotiating your own reality. You begin to trust that your choices don't need to be defended to be valid, that your growth doesn't need to be approved to be real, that your direction doesn't need to be explained to be right for you. You start standing in something quieter, but stronger. Not loud confidence, not defiance, just certainty. The kind that doesn't argue, the kind that doesn't chase agreement, the kind that doesn't need to convince anyone. And the most surprising part? Some people will pull away, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped participating in patterns that kept them comfortable. You stopped explaining, you stopped justifying, you stopped bending. And without those things, they don't quite know how to meet you anymore. That's okay, because at the same time, other things begin to align. You start attracting conversations that feel easier, connections that don't require constant translation, moments where you can just be without editing yourself. And those moments feel different. They feel honest. They feel steady. They feel like something you don't have to work so hard to maintain. And maybe that's what this is really about. Not shutting people out, not refusing to communicate, but finally recognizing that your life is not something you have to constantly explain to be allowed to live. And maybe, just maybe, the peace you've been searching for was never going to come from being understood by everyone, but from finally being okay with not needing to be.